All right, we're back with another read aloud for today. We're on to chapter 21, which is called Only Blackness, and we're going to be back on Mollusk Island. Beyond the outermost reef guarding Mollusk Island, a ramshackle raft plowed through the dark blue sea, which reflected the shimmering afternoon sun like a million mirrors. The raft was made of bamboo and palm tree trunks, lashed together with ropes woven from jungle vines. It was rowed awkwardly by two of Hook's men, using oars carved from driftwood. At the stern, a third man steered with a driftwood tiller. In the center of the raft stood Hook, who, being the captain, neither rowed nor steered. His role was to give orders and to generally be dissatisfied with how they were carried out. In his non-hook hand, he held a spear. Its shaft was bamboo, and its tip was fashioned mollusk style from a piece of shell honed razor sharp. It would pierce the flesh as well as any steel. Next to Hook stood the pot-bellied Smee, wearing pants shredded at the knees and a blue and white striped shirt he'd worn so long that both the blue and the white were almost an identical shade of gray. Behind them rested a wooden cage. Inside it was Peter and a heavy load of rocks. Peter hated being in the cage, staring at the rocks designed to drag him to the bottom of the ocean. He was certain that Tinker Bell would do all she could to warn Fighting Prawn about Hook's plan, but he wasn't certain she'd succeed. Meanwhile, he was trapped with the rocks just a few inches above the waiting sea. The pirates were looking toward the island where an outrigger canoe was just emerging from Mermaid Lagoon, and at the center of the canoe sat Fighting Prawn, his dark-eyed gaze on the pirate raft. Around him, paddling the canoe with quick efficiency, were four mollusk warriors, two of them, Bold Abalone and Brazen Starfish. They were Fighting Prawn's sons. The mollusks quickly reached their rendezvous point, a fairly calm patch of sea just inside the outer reef. Fighting Prawn watched as the pirate raft zigzagged clumsily toward them. He spoke to the others in mollusk language, which to English speakers sounded like strange grunts and clicks. "It's a wonder they can navigate a ship," he said. "Is Peter in the cage?" said Brazen Starfish. Fighting Prawn squinted. "Yes, I see his red hair. Give the signal." Brazen Starfish was sitting on the side of the canoe, away from the pirates, and slapped the water with his paddle 4 times. Fighting Prawn saw a swirl of water like a small rogue wave near the edge of the reef, and he nodded. His eyes then turned skyward, and with effort, picked up a tiny bright speck shooting toward the pirate raft, approaching from the angle so the pirates could not see her. But the pirates' attention was focused on the mollusk canoe, and so none of them saw that speck dart into the cage. Tinker Bell landed in the crook of Peter's elbow. He smiled enormously, relieved to see her. It was all he could do to keep from talking, but she darted to his head and nestled in his bushy red hair. She moved to his right ear and chimed quietly so the pirates wouldn't hear. "We have a plan," she said. "Good," whispered Peter. "What is it?" But instead of answering, Tinker Bell burrowed into his hair. He looked up and saw why. Hook had his face pressed to the cage. "Who are you talking to, boy?" he said. "A rock," said Peter, "and it's smarter than you." The rowers giggled. Hook shot them a silencing glare, and turning back to Peter, he said, "That's a funny joke, boy. You can tell that one to the fish when you get to the bottom of the sea. Meanwhile, here's a joke for you." And he spit a foul gob at the cage. Peter turned away in disgust as it spattered him through the bars. "Now listen, boy. I'll have this spear by your neck during the parley, and if you say one word to them savages, if you so much as sneeze, I will bring this spear down, and your head and body will no longer be acquainted." Smee said, "Approaching the canoe, Captain." "Not a word," Hook snarled at Peter. And to the rowers he said, "Keep us a comfortable distance." As the two vessels neared each other, Tinker Bell dropped back to Peter's arm, holding a tiny finger to her lips to remind him not to speak. He made a shrugging gesture to ask her, "What's the plan?" "No time," she chimed back, and in a flash she was gone, unobserved by the pirates whose attention was on the mollusk canoe, now only about 15 feet away. "Don't come any closer," said Hook. He held the spear up so Fighting Prawn could see it, then held it over the cage. "If I see any trickiness from you savages, I'll run this straight through the boy." "There is no need to hurt the boy," said Fighting Prawn. "I am offering you a chance to leave the island." "That's what your coconut said, but why would you make such an offer?" "We don't like you." Fair enough, I don't like you either, but I've been here 20 years or more. Why do this now?" "Because some other men came ashore, shipwrecked. We want them gone too, and they will take you with them. Hook thought for a moment. My men will repair your ship and supply it with food and water. We will provide you with 4 seaworthy canoes for lifeboats. I give you my word we will make no attempt to harm you or your men. In return, you give me your word that you will leave and never come back. Captain, sounds like a good deal, said Smee. Shut up, Smee, said Hook. Yes, sir. Hook studied the Mollusk chief across the short expanse of water. His face was calm, but his mind was racing. He had realized to his surprise that the Mollusk chief was sincere. He meant what he said. He actually intended to help the pirates leave the island. That was good. But Hook did not want to give up on his plan to drown the boy. He had waited too many years for his moments of sweet revenge. He would have to handle this just right. The savage had to believe that the boy's death was an accident and that he would still allow Hook to leave without being punished. It was perfect, Hook decided. He would rid himself of the boy forever and get off this wretched island. A brilliant plan. Hook was only sorry that not everyone around him was realizing how smart it was. He smiled at Fighting Prawn. All right, then, we have a deal. If you don't mind, I won't shake your hand on it, so we'll have to nod. Fighting Prawn nodded back. So now you can let the boy go. Hook shook his head. Sorry, Chief. The boy is my insurance. I don't plan on letting him go unless you've completed your end of the deal. When the ship is ready, the boy goes free. Not before. Fighting Prawn said nothing, his eyes on the spear tip at Peter's neck. And after a moment, Hook barked an order to his men to turn the raft around. Peter pressed his face to the cage slats, his eyes meeting Fighting Prawn's. Peter could read the expression on the Mollusk chief's face. Didn't he know what Hook was planning to do? Hadn't Tinkerbell warned him, or did he actually believe the pirate was telling the truth? Is he going to let Hook just take him away? The raft was moving now, and the canoe began to turn. Peter started to cry out to Fighting Prawn, but Hook, expecting this, touched the spear tip to Peter's neck, and Peter felt a trickle of blood. One word, boy, and you die right here and now. Desperately, Peter weighed the situation. If he shouted to Fighting Prawn, Hook would spear him, but Hook planned to drown him soon anyway. His only hope was that the plan Tinkerbell had told him about would work, but what was the plan? He watched helplessly as the Mollusk canoe, propelled by the paddles of 4 strong warriors, pulled swiftly away, growing smaller in the distance. Fighting Prawn was still looking back toward the raft, but he had made no move to rescue Peter. The pirates, meanwhile, were paddling the raft toward the outer reef. Peter heard the waves crashing against the reef, and he felt the ocean waves lifting him and lowering the raft. He imagined the depths beneath him and what it would feel like to plunge into them, imprisoned by the weighted cage. Hook, seeing the fear on Peter's face, cackled. You can yell all you want now, boy. The savage can't hear you. The primitive fool actually believed I was going to let you live. With a glance at the receding Mollusk canoe, Hook casually curled the toes of his bare right foot around a rope and pulled it. A knot came loose, and Hook used his left foot to loosen another. The raft shifted and water started gushing into Peter's cage. The spaces between the logs were getting wider. Oh dear, looks like we're having a spot of trouble. He smiled at Peter, his black eyes glistening. Goodbye, boy, he said. Mr. Smee, Peter pleaded. This isn't right. Smee could not bring himself to look at Peter. He shuffled his bare feet onto the raft, his head bent. Okay, boys, make it look good now. Put her into the surf at the edge of the reef. Peter looked back toward the Mollusk canoe. It was still heading away. He was desperate now, moving from wall to wall in the cage, looking for some way out, knowing there was none. The raft was almost on the reef now. The gaps between the raft logs increased. Smee's leg slipped through a gap and went down. A wave lifted the raft, and suddenly it broke apart now, just a loose tangle of logs and boards. Help! Bellowed Hook. Help! Peter's cage was precariously balanced between 2 logs, and it began to slip off. Peter looked frantically back toward the island, and he saw the canoe, now a little more than a speck in the distance. They were coming back, but it was too late. Peter screamed as his cage slipped off the logs and into the sea. As it went under, Peter gulped the last breath. The surging water surrounded him. Underwater, he heard the dull roar of the waves and saw pirate legs kicking about above him, heavy rocks starting to drag him down, down, down underwater. A wave broke above him, clouding the water with foam and air. Down, down, down. He jammed his hands painfully through the cage, fumbling for the knots, but it was no use. There were far too many knots and far too little time. His lungs were starting to burn. The water was growing darker. The light and sound of the surface were far above now. Only blackness. His lungs were on fire. He began to swallow water. He was losing consciousness. Suddenly, he felt something tug on the cage, pulling it through the water. He looked around desperately, but could see only blackness. And then there was nothing. And if you've been reading the book with us this long, which you have, you can probably take a pretty good guess as to who's going to come to the rescue of Peter. But we're going to finish up the chapter now. Peter! Peter! The voice was urgent, and Peter tried to answer, but he could not. He rolled sideways, threw up seawater, then coughing violently. His throat was raw. He blinked and he couldn't really see. What he could see, and where he could see, was dark and damp. He was laying on a rock, and he could hear the roar of the waves nearby. He could make out the outline of the woman's head. Her hair was long and wet. "You are safe, Peter." He suddenly realized the voice. It was unlike the sound of the waves and was coming from inside his head. "Teacher!" he croaked. "I'm here," responded the mermaid, her thoughts becoming his thoughts. "Where am I?" "In a cave in the reef. You are safe." "Thank you." "I'm sorry it took so long to reach you. Chief didn't want the pirate to see." Peter understood. Fighting Prawn wanted to make sure Peter and the mermaid were safely out of Hook's murderous reach. "Can I go back now?" "Chief wants you to wait here until the pirates return to their side." Peter nodded, seeing the cleverness of Fighting Prawn's plan. Let Hook think that he had succeeded in killing Peter. Let him think he had outwitted the savage, then get him off the island. "All right," he said, "I'll stay here until Hook's gone." "Good," Teacher smiled, revealing her sharp, pointed teeth. "You need to rest." Peter laid back on the rock, resting, and for the first time he thought about what the island would be like without Hook. He wondered if his life would become boring. And that's the end of the chapter. So tomorrow we will be on to the next chapter. As a bonus, if you want to look up what an abalone is, you know that the Mollusk tribe a lot of times will name their tribe members after sea creatures. Check out what an abalone is and look up what the word brazen means and see if that fits what you think of when you think of a starfish. The word's brazen, B-R-A-Z-E-N, as a little vocab. If you figure it out, let me know. All right, next chapter tomorrow. Bye.